A modern husband is simply someone who is married to a partner who looks at a relationship as a partnership. And in the 21st century economy, most households have two working folks, and the days where one person works and the other person tends to the home are over. And so many times people don't understand kind of how to go about managing money and managing the home in our new household economy. I literally buy a $2 lottery ticket, and I know the odds are 1 in a trillion to win, but we also know from research that one $2 lottery ticket actually creates happiness because you can dream about what you do with it. But what better way to dream than to dream with your partner, with your spouse? And so for your money date, you have this lottery ticket in front of you, and you ask your spouse, okay, if we win this money, what will we do differently? How would we spend it? What does our world look like if money is no object? And what unravels, what the toolkit does is it addresses the topics that couples argue about the most outside of actual like infidelity. So it focuses on managing money together, managing the home together, supporting each other's careers, and family planning. And those topics require different kinds of conversations, systems, and tools. And so each of these contributors, as you're saying, like the list of the contributors.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with Jackie Cummins-Koski, and we have yet another episode that's a little different. There'll be money involved in this, but we're going to talk a little bit more about marriage. We recently had a prenup episode with Aaron Thomas, so this is along the lines of that theme. So Jackie, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, our guest today is Brian Page, and I like to consider him a great friend of mine. I knew him from his teaching days, and now he has an amazing endeavor that he's embarked on. So he is a former award-winning teacher that made a major shift over the past few years to build a platform called Modern Husbands. There he shares the modern family and how it's changed from previous generations. And in the true form of an educator, Brian infuses data and research to support some of the common ideas we've heard about when it comes to money, as well as sort of dismantling of previous antiquated ideas. So they recently developed something called the Marriage Toolkit. And this has lessons from over 50 national experts on personal finance and marriage topics. So some of them are actually friends of ours and people that have been on the show, like J.L. Collins, Sean Mulaney, Manisha Thakur, and yours truly with a lesson on, what else? HSAs. So we'll dive into all of that in today's show. But first, I couldn't continue without talking about all of his accolades as an educator. So during that time, Brian was recognized as a National Educator of the Year by the Milken Foundation and Ohio Department of Education. He was a CNN Money Hero, a Center of Economic Education Forbes Award winner. And Brian was also a working group member of the U.S. President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability. And after retiring from teaching, he took on a senior level position at Next Gen Personal Finance, and we had them on the show as well. So Brian is married with 3 children, a dog, and a house full of cute little foster kittens. Brian, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, that's awesome. They've met, and I'm about to hear all that Brian's learned about the modern husband. It's not been the focus of financial education. And first off, I want to hear exactly what is a modern husband in your opinion?
A modern husband is simply someone who is married to a partner who looks at a relationship as a partnership. And in the 21st century economy, most households have two working folks, and The days where one person works and the other person tends to the home are over. And so many times people don't understand kind of how to go about managing money and managing the home in our new household economy. And so the focus would be for husbands like myself who have a wife who is ambitious in her career. She has lots of goals herself. How is it that I can provide the support that she needs to excel in her career and to reach her goals, while also ensuring that when she's in the home, we have an environment where our family can thrive?
So, Brian, I have a question. So, would this also extend to like partners that are not married, like domestic partners, same-sex partners?
Yes.
Does the same concept apply?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I struggle with the name because, first of all, when you say partner, there's some lack of understanding from some folks. You have confusion because you have a business partnership. And so I say modern husband just because people really know what that is. And I want to be very clear about our goal is to ensure that all couples, regardless of whether through matrimony or through legal partnership or through just an extended relationship, and same-sex partners as well, that they understand that we're trying to provide them with the information they need in their relationships.
Gotcha.
Let's circle back for a minute so that we can understand you a little better now that we've defined modern husbands. You are a super successful as a K through 12 teacher. What on earth convinced you to move into this marriage and relationship stuff?
Well, my wife had a massive promotion that required us to move from Cincinnati to Ohio. And in order to do that, I knew that I had to give up teaching. I also had an offer from Next Gen Personal Finance and my good friend Tim Ranzetta, and that allowed me to work remotely. And while in Ohio, I helped pass the requirement that every student has to pass a semester-long personal finance class to graduate. And so really, when I was at Next Gen, I taught teachers how to teach personal finance. And then I also ended up advocating for and lobbying for personal finances requirement in other states as well. And long story short, my wife had a big job, I had a big job, and we had 3 kids. And was at that time, money wasn't what was needed. Fortunately, because of some of our early investments, what was needed was one of us to have flexibility, one of us to be the one to really shoulder everything or most of the work at home. So it was my turn. So that's what I decided to do. And I did have a very part-time job as a visiting scholar with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Office of Financial Education, while I did this. But I simply Googled how to be a great husband. And I learned that I had a lot to learn. And initially, I did that just for myself, right? As my thought is, okay, I'm going to own this. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we're here in Atlanta for my wife's career. I'm going to do everything I can to support her. And initially, I started with my wheelhouse, with what I understood, and that's money. And then that grew into understanding that personal finance is personal. We all know that. But when it comes to relationships, there's a different layer of complexity that is really tough for a lot of couples to manage. And when you look at the statistics, one of the leading causes of divorce is money stress. And so I became to understand this whole new world of money and relationships, and grew the advisory board. And basically for 2 or 3 years, when I wasn't focusing on family, just became just head down, laser focused on understanding how is it that people can manage money as a team. And then that evolved into also managing the home, because that's where a lot of friction comes from. So it was just kind of an accidental thing, where I just did it for myself initially, did it for our family initially, and recognized that in our world where a lot of us grew up in a household where he's the breadwinner, or he goes to work and she has the flexible job, or she doesn't work, where we saw what the inside of those homes looked like and grew up in them, those money conversations and grew up in them. That's not the world today. And so practically speaking, what we need is information for couples in a modern world to manage a modern home. And that's what Modern Husbands is.
Yeah, so you're kind of filling a niche that's really not there, or it's not updated, because you're right. So many things has changed in what a household looks like. And so you moved from Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's how I know you. I know that you were instrumental in getting the law passed to require personal finance. So I have yet to thank you. So let me thank you for that and all the advocacy work that you did. But you moved to Atlanta. And now you built the Modern Husbands. So I know about you a lot as far as an educator, but I don't know a lot about like your upbringing. Can you talk a little bit about what was your upbringing like and tell us like some of your first money memories?
So I was lucky. I won the genetic lottery. I had two really great parents. And I have a father who, he's downstairs actually, as we're recording this. He is FI before FI was the thing. And I grew up in a household that lived everything about the FIRE movement. So really, when I like read your book, Jackie, when I listen to these podcasts, it's not new because it's just really what I know as a child. So can I give you an example here? We did travel. For example, we did a big trip to Europe. However, we never stayed in a hotel. Now, I'm going to take that back. I think I stayed in one hotel before I turned 18. We camped. And when we were in Europe, we cycled. We cycled from Paris to Le Mans Saint Michel up to England through the Netherlands, and we camped it the whole way. And that was an example of a positive memory that comes from frugality and looking at life differently. I mean, that's for most people, a 3-week vacation is unaffordable, but we did it in a unique way where I would argue that's a better way because I really got to kind of get a sense of what Europe was like, right? When people ask me, like, where does your passion for money come from? And again, it goes to my upbringing. I really fall back to a story. So my father was a computer engineer. My mother was a special ed teacher. And then my dad had rental properties. Now he grew up super poor. And in order to finish college, he had to live in a railroad car in order to afford college. So he lived in the railroad car and worked on the railroad during the day and then finished college in the evening. So that's how he was able to afford it. And growing up, he would tell me stories like this, but we were known for our terrible cars. When I say terrible cars, let me give you perspective. We had somebody follow us home in one of those giant Woody station wagons when I was like maybe a freshman in high school, sophomore in high school, to recruit our car, to purchase our car, to enter into the Clinton County Demolition Derby. And they sold it and it won. I saw it in the Clinton County Demolition Derby. Okay, so then fast forward now to the next car. My dad eventually had to sell this Chevy Malibu station wagon because the gas gauge didn't work. And when we bought it that way. By the way, I want to be clear about that. You could lift the carpet and see the road. There was no ceiling. The carpet on the ceiling was probably asbestos or was foam. It was the worst car you've ever seen. Now, for perspective, the anything that was metal that was not part of the frame rusted off, including the door handles. So what he did was he drilled holes where the door handles were and ran metal fish wire and hooks. And so to open the door, it was like starting a weed whacker and the door would fling open, right? And he drove that. And he had rental properties. He had like 20 units at the time. And he had to sell it because he pulled out of the driveway and he was towing the lawnmower and the hitch rusted off and the lawnmower went into the yard. He's like, I guess I got to get a different car. So I asked my father that when this happened, I returned from college. I think it was a sophomore in college. And I had figured life out by this point. I'd realized, okay, my parents can afford nice cars. My parents had money, but they still used old tornado damaged furniture for their home. They still drove cars like this. Like, what's the deal? Why did you do this? So my dad told me to get a calculator, and I did. And he asked me what a monthly car payment would be. And I think I guessed at the time $300. And he said, well, what about insurance? And I guessed. He said, well, it's got to be full coverage because you're borrowing. So the bank's going to require that. And so I put that number in. He said, well, take that times 12 months. I said, okay. And he said, now take that times 20 years. And obviously it's this really big number. And I said, what's the point? And he said, the point is, son, there's no way in hell that my kid's going to live in a railroad car like I had to afford to pay to college. And that's the only way that we could afford to pay for your college.
Wow. Look at that sacrifice.
That's interesting. I remember in my childhood that my dad had a Rambler. and he put a trash can in the floor to cover up the fact that there was a hole and the street was going by. It had no seat belts. It was the time when you had that rear facing flip up thing. The kids are all over the place in the car. It was amazing that we all survived. But this is an early retirement extreme story. He's got 20 rental units, significant cash flowing properties. Did you ever feel deprived, or was this fun?
I really would have appreciated a better car. So for those FI folks who have kids, please don't go to that degree. But beyond that, no, I never felt deprived. I mean, we always had loads of opportunities, and I had great neighborhood, and my parents, like I said, like, what a gift. They paid for my school. So I really struggle personally with just this infatuation with stuff, with nicer stuff. And maybe it's because I grew up where our home was nice. It was fine. But like when you bought furniture, like we literally took furniture out of a damaged home from a tornado, or bought furniture at a garage sale, and it's fine. And the notion that people are spending like $10,000 on a couch is bizarre to me. I don't understand why someone would rob themselves of that kind of time, because money really is time, for like a couch. So I guess my perspective is I find it bizarre when people want to have all of these nice things around them all of the time, and they're working really, really hard to have all of these things, and they're robbing themselves of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, people forget, especially late starters, about opportunity cost. And Rob Berger, who was a guest on our show, talks about a car as one of the biggest FI busters. Going through those numbers, it just doesn't make sense. And if you compound that money for you as opposed to against you, I mean, you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in the green from a car that's $40,000 versus $5,000 or $10,000 over time. So I hear you. I couldn't do it. I didn't do it. I succumbed to lifestyle inflation. I just got a new used car, but it was 3 years old. But I do, in my defense, and I've said it before, I've driven 3 cars in my adult lifetime. And the last one, I wanted to have the badge of honor of turning it over to 200,000 miles, but it wasn't meant to be. Things started falling off of it, and the repairs became thousands of dollars. And the trade-in value of this car is $700. I mean, it's unbelievable what happens to depreciation of cars over time. And it was working for me. It was getting me where I needed to go. It was a utility. And so driving them a long time kind of offsets some of that upfront expense, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
The sponsor of this episode is Abundo Wealth. We've talked about how helpful financial advice can be on the path to FI. Unfortunately, most of the industry is expensive and doesn't always have your best interest in mind. Our friends at Abundo Wealth are changing that. They don't sell any products. They teach you how to manage your own low-cost investments and provide expert advice. The service costs only $189 a month for ongoing one-on-one access to a financial planner. Abundo provides guidance to clients at all stages of the FI journey, helping you to clear about your goals and dreams and setting up the spending, saving, and investment plan to achieve them. And the best part is that everyone is welcome, even if you're starting from square one. Our listeners can get the best deal available for this awesome service. Normally, the first month costs $499 to get started. But if you sign up for your free intro meeting at abundowealth.com and mention Catching Up to FI, you can get that first month for just $189, a savings of over $300. That's abundowealth.com.
So now we kind of see, Brian, how that may have led you to becoming a personal finance teacher. I never knew that history. And so what year did you start being a personal finance teacher? Who knew that that didn't even existed until recently?
Yeah, I want to say maybe 2003, 2004, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So you had to be one of the first, right?
So I took over for a guy who had the class, and there was one class. So in teaching, you have 7 periods, and so of those periods, one was personal finance, the other were other classes, and then within 3 years it grew substantially to the point where it was primarily what I was teaching, and then it became a requirement where I taught.
And when did you become FI? How old were you?
Oh, you mean financially independent? Well, I'm financially independent because of my wife working. So I don't know if that completely counts. We're not both retired. We had the financial freedom to make that choice probably within the last 5 years. And it's largely because we started investing a lot early. When we got married, we had a child young. And again, I just went with what I knew. And I knew that buying a typical 3 or 4 bedroom home would get us into the rat race. So I bought a duplex and rented one side out and lived in the other and saved just a boatload of money. And then we pay the duplex. Well, I shouldn't say we, our renters pay the duplex off, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And then I can't believe how much money we sold it for. The rental market's going insane. So we sold it a couple years ago, and there's more than enough there to pay for our kids' college education.
Well, that's a great way to save for a kid's college education. People forget that that's an option if you buy. And you were one of the first house hackers. I mean, you were very ahead of your time, and it's just from your upbringing. So, of course, I guess you could teach lessons to folks early on. 2003, I mean, you predated Mr. Money Mustache. So you're Mr. Money Beard.
I was ridiculed for doing that. I was ridiculed by a couple financial planners. They told me how extreme that was, even though I was not only had a pension, I had a 457B, my wife had a 401k, I had an IRA, and they were still like, oh my gosh, that's such a volatile investment. And she had the audacity to tell me that during the financial collapse. So I'm raising rent, and she's telling me as the financial world is collapsing that I'm the wrong one.
It sounds like you were also modern in the sense that your wife may have been the primary breadwinner all along. Is that true?
No. So for most of my life, I have been. So again, I think this plays into kind of the challenges that a lot of modern husbands have. When we got married, we made the mistake. Let me back up. When we had a child, we made the mistake of just looking in the short term of calculating the difference between Hope going back to work and Hope staying home. So I stayed home for a little bit during the day. In the evenings, I worked. And then eventually it turned into me working one job and then a side hustle and then 2 full-time jobs. So I worked about 80 hours a week for about a decade. I had a bleeding ulcer. I'll never forget running down the hallway in my school, vomiting blood in a trash can when I was, 37, 38 years old, because financially, my second job paid more than my wife could make on a first job. So she had more of a flexible job. And it was breaking us. And I really regret doing that. And ultimately what happened was that my wife's career started to take off, and I was able to quit my second full-time job. I was able to reduce the amount of consulting work that I was doing in order to be able to kind of live my life in a healthier way.
Well, did your wife ever take over as the primary breadwinner?
She is now. But she's only been the primary breadwinner for a few years.
So you're truly a modern husband now. And then how do you explain the fact that households with a female primary breadwinner or a partner who's the primary breadwinner and has a higher income, there's a significantly higher divorce rate in these couples? And why is that? And what do we do about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, a modern husband might be the breadwinner too. I mean, ultimately what we're looking at is that in most marriages today, particularly where both folks have college degrees, that they kind of take turns on who the breadwinner is. And they have to constantly kind of adjust how they operate in their households based on who has different career opportunities. But yeah, you're right that, first of all, 40% of American households now include a woman who is earning around the same as her husband or more. And the data point is correct that when a woman is the breadwinner, she is more likely to file for divorce. But there's some important follow-ups to that data point. When women earn more, they contribute even more to managing the home. So typically, men do a lot of the one-off tasks, like mowing the lawn, as an example. Women traditionally do the tasks that are in front of you every single day and that require constant thought, checklists in their head to make sure things are being done. It's called a mental load. And that is because traditionally that's what a lot of us saw growing up, because the man was the breadwinner and she had the flexible job. Unfortunately, when you bear that burden, whether you're a man or woman and you're working a big stressful job and you're working lots of hours, you become frustrated with your husband. And what the research has found and experts have stated is that women are unfortunately psychologically succumb to what's called like the white glove test, meaning this is an actual literal story from Dr. Ross, my co-host on Modern Husbands podcast, where his mother-in-law would put on a white glove and go around the house and check for dust and judge his mom based on how clean the house was. And women oftentimes feel the pressure of managing the home. Like if you walk into a home and it's dirty, women feel like that was their responsibility and they're being judged, not the man. When a child is misbehaving, women feel like I'm not doing enough and they're the one being judged. And so what the researchers found was that women are oftentimes compensating because they're working so many hours by coming home and trying to do even more at home like they saw their mom doing because they feel guilty. And so men then in turn who don't understand that are like, fine. They just kind of sit back and then resentment builds. And then it turns into contempt. And we know from John Gottman, contempt is the marriage killer. And so in a modern household where both partners have big jobs, men have to, when they see that, men have to recognize, hey, like, I need to sit down with my spouse and I need to explain to them, look, I've got your back. If someone walks in our house and it's dirty, it's our house, not yours. And it's my responsibility, not yours. But they have to recognize that they need to be the one to take the initiative to do that. And they have to either develop a system or use systems that are out there to manage the home in a way where it's effective, productive, and there's no arguments. So that's why that is occurring in most instances. And you could also argue that kind of through the history of marriage, women oftentimes were kind of stuck, right? If a man is the breadwinner and she doesn't have any real earning power, I mean, a woman couldn't have a credit card in 1974. Like, so they're kind of stuck in bad marriages. And so, yeah, you might have a greater likelihood of divorce if it's just not working because women can now earn an income. And so that does play into it a little bit.
Yeah, and Brian, I think that will resonate with a lot of our late starter community members because sometimes that is the reason why they're getting a late start. Maybe they relied on the husband a little too much, or they really didn't have the ability to have their own profile as far as credit and investing and just realize, hey, this is not working, get a divorce, and now you're having to start over. So a lot of late starters are starting over. Now, you mentioned Gottman. Can you explain to us who that is?
Yeah, so John Gottman's regarded as one of the leading marriage experts in the world. And so his focus really is on just relationships. And I don't profess to be a John Gottman expert or a marriage counselor. I know enough to read the research summaries and to talk to the professionals in that arena. But what I recognize as I'm doing that is there are so many connections to what he is pointing out and then money and household management. They're interconnected. They're not compartmentalized.
Okay, well, this has implications with regards to finances. And you talk about yours, mine, and ours as an important topic in partnerships. What do you recommend with regards to commingling finances? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the research because I'm a sample size of one. Let's start with first marriages. That's an important distinction. Last year, the groundbreaking research was released by Dr. Jenny Olson that found that for first marriages and engaged couples who put all of their money together, that over time, that the happiness that we see decline after your wedding day, and I hate to break it to folks who are engaged, all the research shows the same thing. You become less happy immediately, that buffers. And it buffers so much so that after 2 years, the folks who were managing money together in the same account, not retirement, obviously that's different, but bank accounts, that they ended up being happier than the folks who kept their money separate or used the yours, mine, and ours strategy. And it was a significant percentage of couples who did that. That's what my wife and I did. However, that's one strategy that works for the masses, but there are always outliers. And just because you're an outlier doesn't mean you're wrong. So a second strategy to bring up is if a couple, again, we're talking first-time marriages, I'll get to second marriages in a moment, is that when a couple are financial opposites. So Dr. Scott Rick, both of these people are in my marriage toolkit. He's at the University of Michigan. He wrote Tightwads and Spendthrifts. And a tightwad isn't somebody who just loves to save. There's somebody who hates to spend. There's an assessment for that. There's a scale for that. I am one of those. There are things that I do enjoy spending money on. I am not my father. I love experiences. I don't own a Tesla Cybertruck. I don't think I ever will, but I think it would be cool to own it. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm a complete tightwad, but I am pretty far on the scale. My wife is not a total spendthrift, but she does like to spend like a normal human being. She's normal, I'm not. Now, what he would say is if you are actual opposites, that oftentimes those people, they have big fights about money for a number of reasons. It could be because of financial infidelity, because you have a spendthrift who is hiding spending decisions because they're going to be ridiculed by the tightwad. So they don't want that fight. So they just would rather, we're going to hide it. And then the tightwad obviously doesn't want to be deceived or lied to about money. And so it makes it much more challenging to have total financial transparency. So what he recommends is financial translucency, meaning you have yours, mine, and ours. So imagine a structure, and the structure, the flow of the structure matters a lot. In this structure, both couples, so we're assuming that you both work, have your paychecks directly deposited into a shared account. And from that shared account, all of your bills are paid. And in most cases, 95% of the money kind of flows from that. And then you have your separate accounts where money then is deposited into your individual accounts. And it could be a nominal amount of money, $100 a month, $200 a month, something that's enough where a spendthrift can feel like that they have some financial autonomy and the tightwad can save more. And what he recommends is financial translucency, meaning that the money that's in the shared account, it's kind of financially money laundered, right? And they're psychologically money laundered, I should say. And after that, where you have a total picture of exactly what's going on in those accounts, and you can have good money date conversations about those accounts. When they go into the separate accounts, just kind of leave it be. The agreement is if I want to look at what you're doing, I have access to it because maybe you fear actual infidelity, as an example. But the recommendation is just kind of leave it be. And that helps couples who are financial opposites navigate those extremes. Okay, the last point would be the research behind second marriages. So Michael Van Cleve, who's also in the toolkit, he is working on his PhD on managing money in a blended family. And he's in a blended family himself. And what he found was that in blended families, second marriages, particularly when both couples are bringing children from past marriages into the relationship, that it's really complex. And you want to do everything you can to simplify. And so what he said works best is that you have an account for your current marriage, and then you have an account for your previous life. And you don't commingle those accounts. And it reduces the friction, reduces the fights. Again, at personal finance is more personal than finance. Perhaps other people have found methods that work for them, but that's just what the research says.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about the second marriages because there can be a lot of sensitivity around that when you are especially having the kids, because everybody has a different idea of how that should go down. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of our late starters are in second marriages or maybe even contemplating it. So you mentioned the marriage toolkit several times. So can you tell us a little bit more about the marriage toolkit that you built? I think it's impressive that you got so many experts in both personal finance and marriage and relationships to contribute to it. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's really been a team effort. I mean, you're an excellent contributor to it. I love to talk about HSAs with you. There's such the HSA
I know we
hacks.
nerd out.
I love the HSA hacks. But the idea is that couples are really busy. And the challenges that couples face in this busy world, where kind of financial world is far more complex, require evidence-based solutions. And I'm not like kind of a dogmatic person where I think there's one way for everybody. I think that's inappropriate. So what the toolkit does is it addresses the topics that couples argue about the most outside of actual like infidelity. So it focuses on managing money together, managing the home together, supporting each other's careers, and family planning. And those topics require different kinds of conversations, systems, and tools. And so each of these contributors, as you're saying, like the list of the contributors, I'm so blessed. What they did was we had 5 to 15 minute interviews in most instances over their topics of expertise. And we really addressed clearly and efficiently what the consideration should be in that topic. And then I have graphics to try to simplify everything, text that's reasonably concise to add value to it, conversation prompts that you can use to talk about money, and when appropriate, activities that you can do together, like the money egg exercise. And the hope is that each of those topics only take about 30 minutes. And it's not a course, it's a toolkit. So it doesn't have to be taken sequentially. You don't have to watch or dive into each of them. You can dive into the topics as you feel that they are appropriate. Now, obviously, I would recommend that folks use the toolkit before they get married. Have all of these tough conversations before marriage. It makes it a lot easier. And then you can revisit them, but at least you're not stressing out and having conversations while you're stressed because you weren't prepared.
Yeah, sounds like a great wedding gift or a wedding shower gift to me, for any of our kids or grandkids. And we are going to include a link, and you'll be offering a discount for our listeners. But yeah, I love the fact that you don't have to do them in sequence. I was very happy to do it. It was only, my session was maybe 10 minutes or whatever, but it covers so many different topics, and you have assembled like so many experts in these areas. And so to pull them aside for 10 minutes and get them to be included in this toolkit was a huge value. And I love a lot of what you did in true teacher form. Is what you're doing is rooted in research, and you have brought in experts where you're not the expert to try to work this thing out. I'm divorced. I don't know. Some of this probably would have helped a lot when I was married, but I was young. I didn't know what a good marriage or relationship looked like. So most of us were just winging it and just trying to figure this stuff out, and having resources like yours, I think definitely would have helped.
Well, you can't wing really romantically alone a merger of two businesses. I mean, these days people are coming into their marriage in their late 20s, early 30s, already with assets. They may have a house. They may have significant retirement already. And your toolkit sounds like a great precursor to Aaron Thomas's prenup prescription. I mean, if you want to get ready for a prenup, you should work through the toolkit. And this is a lot of work. A marriage is a lot of work. And there's a lot of transparency or translucency that really should take place before the merger, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, with couples who already have assets, that it makes it even more important to have these conversations. I mean, obviously, I could talk about it for like 40 hours or 50 hours. I mean, that's basically how long it takes to go through the whole toolkit. But just something as simple as joining bank accounts. I mean, we talked about that for almost 10 minutes. Or what about commingling credit? When do you add your spouse as an authorized user? When do you not? When do you have joint credit? Like, these are all different ways that you need to consider how to use each other's past like credit history as leverage, or past credit history for avoidance. And you can go on and on about all of these things. And retirement, I tell you what, I read a study. I think it was like 2 years ago it was released, and my jaw dropped. 1 in 4 married couples, 1 in 4, they are collectively contributing enough to their retirement plans to earn at least enough to get the company match. So again, 1 in 4 married couples, between the two of them, are contributing collectively enough for them each to be getting the full company match. But again, 1 in 4 are not getting the full company match because they've never talked about it. So you have somebody who's like me, super frugal, that's contributing 100. I'm literally whatever the IRS max is, like 22,000. I don't care what the employer match is. And the other one who might only be contributing 3%. And so if you just have a conversation, you can literally just have the one spouse contribute another, let's say 3% more to get the remaining amount of employee match. And then you reduce yours a little bit. It's that simple conversation where married couples, 1 in 4, are leaving. I don't want to say it's free money, it's compensation. They're leaving their employer's money that was supposed to be given for you on the table. They're just like, no, we don't need that extra money.
Yeah, you're hitting a sore spot for me, Brian, because at the time of my divorce, I've been divorced for well over 10 years now, but we never looked at our 401ks or our retirement accounts together. I was really young, so was he, and the retirement money just felt like it was so far away. It didn't even feel like mine. But at the time of the divorce, you are forced to look at that stuff.
Right.
And there was a big disparity between what I had and what he had. I had $20,000 in my 401k and he had $120,000. And so that's a huge difference. We were right around the same age. We were making roughly the same money. You have that gender wage gap that I think came into play where he was starting to get faster increases than me. And what it came down to is that we were invested in different things. What if we would have talked and looked at our retirement accounts together, and he's saying, oh, no, you should have this fund, or you should be in stocks. You shouldn't be all in a money market, or whatever I was invested in simply was not growing at the same pace as his. So, yeah, we definitely missed out on that. And I beat myself up a long time, like not realizing that we had such a difference. But I had someone ask me one time, do you think he was hiding money? I'm like, no, he wasn't hiding money. It's just that we didn't talk about it. Yeah. We weren't on the same page. I could have, again, as a couple, as a household, we probably should have looked at the investment accounts and the retirement accounts together and made sure we were consistent in what we wanted to do and what our goals were for that. So, yeah, that piece was really important. And I'm sure it fed into all kinds of other things and perhaps reasons for the divorce. But I definitely resonate with that. And I can see that happening a lot.
Well, in Jackie's story, I mean, if I may be a little transparent here, she started with that. And then 10, 11, 12 years later, she retired with $1.3 million, just based on a money mindset shift. And she never earned more than 6 figures. I mean, it's an incredible story. And our late starters need to hear this over and over again. They can start at 40, they can start at 50, and they can get there. It's entirely possible.
Hey, Bill, I got my CFP credential a few years ago, but you had been talking about possibly getting yours, and you were so interested in that CFP level knowledge. Are you still interested in that?
Yeah, but I don't want the credentials. How do I do it, a little bit on the lighter version?
Well, I think I got just the thing for you. I got with my friends at the Boston Institute of Finance, and guess what? They have come up with a personal growth track curriculum that is for people that just want to expand their own knowledge. They don't need course credit, but they want that CFP level education. And it's going to be for a lot less than what you would normally pay for going for the CFP.
Well, do they have different programs? My schedule's a little off. Do I have to be live for classes, or how does it work?
I know you're a busy guy at the hospital all the time, but they have 2 options. They have self-paced courses that you can either take individual, you can just take tax if you want, or they have the instructor-led courses. So probably you'd like the flexible one. But the good thing is that you can learn on the go. Their whole program is mobile friendly, and you could use your iPad, you can use your cell phone, but they make it super easy. So I think it might be just for you.
It sounds like it. I'll check it out.
Yeah, just check out bostonifi.com/personal-growth. We'll drop it in the show notes, but it could be something that will help you up your game.
Now, say you get married and you've gone through your marriage toolkit, you've gone through your prenup. How do you keep the conversations going? You have a neat trick that you talked about in one of your podcasts about buying a $2 lottery ticket and money dates. Can you tell us about how do you structure a money date? What do you talk about in a money date? And how did the $2 lottery ticket help?
I wish somebody would have taught me what a money date was when we first got married. We were kind of structured in a way where she trusted me. We went about our way. I kind of managed things, but that might work initially, but that begins to unravel. So a money date is a time that you set aside regularly. So initially, I would suggest once a week. And then as you get older, you can obviously meet less frequently because you're going to get into a rhythm. And that is a time where you're in an environment where there aren't any distractions. So there was no phone, there's no children. It's not 10:30 at night when you're decision fatigued and your emotions are kind of running high because high emotion, low cognition. And so maybe it's a Saturday morning, maybe it's a Sunday morning, and you sit down to discuss whatever is appropriate at that time. So let's just say it's your first money date and you're nervous to talk about money, and a lot of people are, and they'll figure out that the more you talk about it, the easier it is. And it's really not a big deal when you get into a rhythm. But that first step's hard. And one of the reasons it's hard is because people equate money with stress and tension. Money is a tool to unlock love and support. And so something as simple as buying, and I want to, this is not my idea. This is Dr. Megan McCoy's from Kansas State. And like you said, it's in the toolkit. But what she recommends and what I do with my wife every once in a while for fun is I literally buy a $2 lottery ticket. And I know the odds are 1 in a trillion to win, but we also know from research that one $2 lottery ticket actually creates happiness because you can dream about what you do with it. But what better way to dream than to dream with your partner, with your spouse? And so for your money date, you have this lottery ticket in front of you and you ask your spouse, okay, if we win this money, what will we do differently? How would we spend it? What does our world look like if money is no object? And what unravels is some truth behind how we wish we were living our life. And some of that truth can become your reality in your marriage if you look at things a little bit more skeptically. If you look inward and ask yourself, do I really need to spend my money here when I could be spending my money there to create more happiness based on what my wife and I or my husband and I spoke about? So for example, let's say that in that conversation, one of the first things that comes up is that we would hire maids. We would have people that would do all the cleaning. We would have somebody that does all the lawn care. We would never have to worry about that again. We wouldn't fight about chores again. Okay, well, most people can't hire a full-time staff to be maids and cook dinners. But you can outsource cleaning once a week. Some people can. You can outsource mowing the lawn. You can outsource meals through like meal delivery services. There are ways that you can outsource the time that you would spend doing things that maybe you don't love and pay to get that time back to do things that you do love. And so when you start the money date in a way where you're talking about your joys and your dreams, your aspirations, it makes it a lot easier to then dive into your budget, to then say, okay, how can we work together to kind of get our life to like closely resemble that life? We're not going to be driving around 9 Lamborghinis, but we might have a clean house on Saturday morning and we can actually go out with our friends and go hiking. And as money dates evolve, assuming that you're using the appropriate systems, you then have specific goals. So for my wife and I, we always travel. We just got back from Maui. We loved it. We went to Switzerland the year before with our family. We're probably going to go to Greece next year. She just sent me a link. She's like, this is where I want to go. Let's talk about it on our money date. And so we just sit down. We look at our financial circumstances. We love Tiller. So we just have all of our data right there. We have our savings account. And we just have a savings account that's high yield account specific for that vacation. We put the money in there. That is our vacation fund. It is untouchable. This is our priority. This is what we're going to do. Maybe the next financial date is about cutting back. Where are we maybe overspending? What can we look at to reduce costs? And each money date might have its own individual goals that come about it. And some couples can do that on their own. Some need a financial therapist because things are rough. It's tough to talk about money. Some could use, I'm going to beat the desk on this, a fee-only financial planner, somebody required to put your financial interests ahead of their own, to sit down and meet with them and construct a long-term financial plan. Some couples can do it on their own. Some couples like to include their children every once in a while. We do that. Ron Lieber wrote The Opposite of Spoiled, and there's a story in there that I loved because the kids didn't understand where the money went. So this guy decides, I'm going to take my paycheck and I'm going to pull it all out in cash in $1 bills. And I'm going to lay it across the kitchen table. And I'm going to have categories, envelopes, and tell the kids, you put the money where you think we spend it. So the kids are kind of guessing, but they're also recognizing this giant pile of money. And now they're like really appreciating their parents. They're realizing, oh my gosh, my parents are doing really well. They're working hard for us. And as they're moving it around, what it did was it gave the kids a sense of appreciation because they saw that a lot of the money was going to making their lives better. And it then evolved into a conversation about values. And so you can bring your kids into the conversations as well.
I love Ron Lieber, and maybe you can help us get him on the show. I think he was one of your experts, if I'm not mistaken.
He is. Yeah. Happy to do it. Opposite of Spoiled, one of the best books, period, I've ever read. I cannot say enough great things about it. I'm a huge fan of Ron and his writing.
Yeah, and I've read it too. He also wrote one that's very important on how to afford college, which is important later. So yeah, I mean, I'd absolutely love to have him on the show. So
he just come out with a new book. Is there a new book?
That was the How to Afford College. It was
okay. It wasn't the algebra of.
Hold on, it's The Price You Pay for College. It's the blue book right there.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the things that may happen with these money dates is you may have a hard time getting your partner on board. What do you suggest to couples like this, where one person's like, you take care of all of it. I have no interest. Who cares about this FI thing? I'm not going to CUtFI. What do you do with those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing that you need to recognize is that many of our money stories originate from our childhood. Obviously, I shared mine. You can see why I am the way I am. And your spouse is going to have their own memories and their own relationship with money. And sometimes that relationship is negative. Sometimes there's been significant financial trauma, big T. And you need to understand why they have this inclination for money avoidance, because you don't want them to be excluded from these conversations. So I think a conversation is important. And some of the conversation starters that would help is just simply asking, hey, what's your first memory of money? What's your first positive memory of money? What's your negative memory of money? What are some of the things that you saw from your parents or your parent that had to do with money that were tough for you to deal with? What were some of the things they did that brought you joy? And let's assume that you don't need the intervention of a financial therapist. It's really important that you distinguish between controlling money and managing money. And controlling money is toxic. You never want to control a spouse using money as that tool for control. And that can be done with financial deception. That can be done by willful ignorance. And it can be tragic if there's a divorce. It can be tragic if there's a death. And so in the instance that you brought up where one spouse is like, I just don't want to deal with it. And frankly, that's my wife. She does not want to really do any of that stuff. I'm the one who brings the data to the table. Here's our spending. Here are our goals. Here are our current accounts, our savings accounts, our investment accounts. Here's where we are. What do you think? Whatever the topic is, where are we going to go on vacation? Where can we spend our money differently to become happier? Whatever it may be. So she is fully aware of our financial picture And the conversation isn't about the mechanics of money, the money management kind of nitty gritty. She has no interest in that. It's about our life. It's about our goals, our desires, our dreams. And money's just a tool to get there. And sitting down on a money date with all that information in front of her so she can see it, although she's disinterested after 30 seconds, it makes for a data-informed decision to come about after the conclusion of the money date.
Well, we have an episode actually early on in the podcast called Coins and Couch Cushions, a story from one of our listeners who came on her first podcast ever and talked about her husband who wasn't interested. And she took the data from, say, a Tiller, and we need Tiller as a sponsor, Jackie. That would be a great.
Yeah. Well, what is Tiller? I've heard of it before. Can you tell us real quick what it is? Well, Brian uses it, right?
What's a money track?
But
it integrates with like Excel spreadsheets. So it's great for people that are spreadsheet oriented, right, Brian?
In a sense, yeah. I mean, we used it because we're time poor, and you can link all of your accounts to it. And after you auto categorize everything, obviously you're going to spend some time onboarding everything. Then everything's automated. So every day I get an email alert with everything, all our spending from the day before, the current status of our financial accounts. And because I just don't have the time to manually input our choices. I don't want to go in and redo the work. It just does the work for you after it's set up. So for me, if I want to talk about money with Hope, or if she has questions, she has access to Tiller as well. We have the same account, and she just could log in and look at it.
So Hope is your wife, right? So shout out to Hope, because I'm thinking she's not quite as excited to come to these money meetings as you are, but you can get her there long enough to talk about the important things. And I'm guessing some of the topics would also be, do you talk about like the estate planning stuff, like any other critical topics that you include in your money meetings?
Yeah, we just did our will before we left for Hawaii. We know we still have some additional estate planning to do, some real nitty gritty. Typically, the way our relationship is I do most of that work, the nitty gritty work, and then I review it. So like, for example, with our will, I wrote them, or rewrote the will, I should say, and then just sent it to her for review. And then she's changed a couple of little things and then went to our financial planner as an example. So, I mean, that goes into teamwork, right? I mean, you don't have to have a partner who's into money like you. I mean, chances are opposites marry. So there's nothing wrong with being like the money geek, like all three of us are, and doing all these things. And then recognizing, okay, man, I can make this kind of fun for my spouse if I make this about us, if I make this about our marriage, if I make this about our family, and just use all that data to make sure they're in the loop, and then focus on the stuff they love to talk about.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time. You're a busy guy that has many other things to do, and we really appreciate the fact that you've offered to share some of your time and knowledge with us and our late starter audience. I think this has been a great episode, Jackie. What about you?
Yeah, it absolutely has. And he opened up our eyes about a lot of things with not just married couples, but partners, relationships, and things like that. And I knew Brian had a lot to offer. So that's why I was really excited to get you on the show. And you mentioned Dr. Megan McCoy. She was my professor at Kansas State. So I'm just still baffled by all these heavy hitters that you have that's part of your tool. So tell us where people can get the toolkit.
Modernhusbands.com. You'll see a pop-up, you'll see a button at the top, and just click on the marriage toolkit button and it'll take you to a free preview. The preview is just kind of an overview of what to expect. And then the first one is a money date, how to conduct it. The expert for that is Dr. McCoy. And it's not a static product. Think of it as kind of like an iPhone where it's always being updated. So every month I go in and I update information. I had to update one on whether to buy or rent. That was the topic based on current mortgage rates, the recent law that reduced the amount realtors can make. I make new infographics, and then we add new topics. We're building a new topic now on managing income volatility in your home. If your monthly income changes quite a bit from one month to the next, how do you manage it? And then we're building one on travel. So it's not a static product. We're going to consistently make it better and better and better.
Well, as a
Great.
parent, this sounds like a great gift along with the prenup prescription to your kids and your
I
grandkids.
got it for my daughter. She just got engaged. I have it for her. Thank you, Brian.
Oh,
You're
nice
welcome.
job, Jackie. I have yet to cross that bridge, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Hopefully, my kids are interested in protecting their financial life, being transparent, being translucent, and just having a better marriage because of this. Just like you said, the honeymoon period drops and the stress begins, the work begins, and this takes some of the work out of marriage and
Right.
gets you on the same page. And so there's not all this stress. And we are about taking stress out of our lives, buying back our time. And Brian, thank you so much for being here. This has been great.
Oh, this was fun. I could talk to you two all day long. Thank you for this.
Well, we're going to have you back on, I'm sure, because there's a lot more to dig into. Thanks again for your time, and we'll see you next week on Catching Up to 5.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. So our social media is Diana Falk, our editor Fritz Bassard, and show notes are done by Sarah von Sternberg. We love them and they keep us going.
Yeah, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community and we hope you love us back. If you want to support the show and what we're doing, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to virtually say thank you if you get value from our content. The link is in the show notes, or you can head over to our website at catchinguptofy.com and click on the Support the Podcast tab at the top right. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to 5. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
While we are financial educators, and I'm a financial professional that loves to teach, our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to 5.